visit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledecus, prompsitos sana pium. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledecus, prompsitos sana Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledecus, prompsitos sana pium. Israel est tu Rex, Davidis et inclita proles, nomine qui in Domini, Rex benedicte venis, cetus in excelsis, te laudat celicus omnis, et mortal vis homo, et cuncta creata simul. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledecus, prompsitos sana.
Okay, this is the test of my voice. And whoops, now I'll turn on Skype and make a free test call. And how come I can't hear Skype? How come I can't hear Skype? Oh, because I have this guy on, no?
Solvebant munia lauris, nos tibi regnanti, angimus excellemus.
How come I can't? What am I listening to?
Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledecus, prompsitos sana pium. Iplacuere tibi, placeate votio nostra, Rex bone Rex clemens, cui bona conta placent. Gloria
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui puerile decus, promsito sana Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui puerile decus, promsito sana pium. Israeles tu Rex, Davidis et inclita proles, nomine qui in Domini, Rex benedicte venis, cetus in excelsis, te laudat celicus omnis, et mortalis homo, et cuncta creata simul. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui puerile decus, promsito sana pium. Plebs Hebrea tibi, cum palmis obvia venit, cum precevoto ymnis, ad sumus exetibi, itibi pasuro, solvebant munia lauris, nos tibi regnanti, tangimus exemelos. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui puerile decus, promsito sana pium. Iplacuere tibi, placeat devotio nostra, Rex bone Rex clemens, cui bona cuncta placent. Gloria laus Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledicus, promsitus sana pium. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledicus, promsitus sana pium. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledicus, promsitus sana pium. Israel est tu Rex, Davidis et inclita proles, nomine qui in Domini, Rex benedicte venis, cetus in excelsis, te laudat celicus omnis, et mortalis homo, et cuncta creata simul. Gloria laus et honor tibi sit, Rex Christe Redemptor, cui pueri ledicus, promsitus sana pium. Plebs Hebrea tibi, cum palmis obvia venit, cum precevo ymnis, ad sumus exce tibi, tibi passuro, solvebant munia lauris, nos tibi regnanti.
Hi, this is Rosh Homan, and welcome once again to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, the show on Radio Maria that celebrates the Jewish roots of the Catholic Church, or seen the other way around, that celebrates the fulfillment, the full realization of all of the promise of Judaism in the Catholic Church and her sacraments. Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit for today's show, because of the happenstance, so to speak, of where we are on the church and secular calendars. Because today on the traditional Latin Mass calendar, we have the feast of King Henry II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor around the turn of millennium before last, in other words, the late 900s to the very early 1000s. And he is the only Holy Roman Emperor to have been canonized as a saint. He was a very, very holy man who actually wanted to be a monk, but he ended up being the king and the Holy Roman Emperor. And he lived and ruled entirely for God. So we have that as an example of a 100% sold out to Christ ruler. Then we also had yesterday, Bastille Day, the celebration of the French Revolution, which was the overthrow of a Christian kingdom in favor of a entirely secular government. As a matter of fact, they outlawed, the first thing the French Revolution leaders did was outlaw Catholicism, outlaw the church. They even changed the calendar to make the week have 10 days so that nobody could even figure out when was a Sunday, to observe the Sunday rest and so forth, to strip God entirely out of society. So we have that kind of counterpoint between King Henry II, a saint who was also king, and the French Revolution, just a day apart. And then we also had the Feast of Christ the King, not a long time ago, relatively recently. And we also had the 4th of July, the celebration of the founding of the United States as a one nation under God, as it says in the Declaration of Independence. So we see the last 2 weeks have been saturated with this issue of the relationship between church and state, the relationship between God as ruler and authority, and human reason as ruler and authority. So I want to dedicate today's show to it. Now, we have a wealth of teaching in the Catholic Church, and I wanted to focus on two popes and two papal encyclicals. The earlier one is Mirari Vos, which was written by Pope Gregory XVI in 1832, which is about the relationship between the ruler of a state and religion. And then a few decades later, Leo XIII's Immortale Dei, which is also about the duty of the ruler of a state to be responsive to God's law. So I have those two. And then I have a third author, I could say, or Catholic authority, who was only a cardinal, who's cardinal, I'll call him in the kind of American pronunciation, Pius. He was French. He was the Cardinal of Poitiers, France, so he's usually referred to as Cardinal P, which is just what the French name, the French version of the same name, which is Pius in Latin. So I'll call him Cardinal Pius. And he was actually very close to Pope Pius X, and was an advisor to Pope Pius X, and was participated deeply in Pope Pius X's encyclical also on the relationship between the authority of God and the authority of the state. So those are the three Catholic sources that I'm going to use today to open up this discussion about what it means, the separation between church and state, and whether it actually makes sense to have a civil government that does not acknowledge God's law. We're seeing the repercussions of that today, of course. Now, I'll cut to the chase. This show will be upside down, backwards, and scrambled, but in any case, if you're listening, you may already know that's my style. But anyway, I'll cut to the chase. At the time of the French Revolution, It was France was a confessional state. The king was crowned by the Pope, and the the authority of the state was directly tied to the authority of God, and the king's role was essentially to represent the authority of God in the civil sphere. So it was, in that sense, it was accused of being a theocracy. It wasn't really a theocracy, but you could call it a theocracy because the leadership in principle came from God. Now, at the time of the French Revolution, the idea was we shouldn't have a theocracy. The state and the authority of the state rests with the people, and it shouldn't rest on revelation, divine revelation, what God has revealed to us. It should rest on human nature and human reason. So the idea was, we're not going to have a theocracy, we're going to have a secular government. Bishop Pius, Cardinal Pius, made the point that such a thing doesn't exist. You're always, if you have a government, you're always going to have a theocracy. The only question is whether the God who is in charge is the most holy Trinity, Christ, or whether the God who is in charge is Satan. Because nature abhors a vacuum, certainly Satan abhors a vacuum. The entire drama of human existence is the fight for human souls. And if you have an authority structure which has salvation and damnation potential over the population, and you keep God out of that seat of authority, that seat of authority is not going to stay empty. We know who's going to slither his way in pretty quickly and replace the God's law with what Satan would like to see imposed on everybody. I'm not going to get political. All you have to do is open up a newspaper or turn on a TV news report, and you can see how what's good is evil, what is good is called evil in today's government legal structure, and what's evil is called good, right? I mean, there used to be blasphemy laws which prohibited against insulting God, right? Including in the United States, by the way. There were blasphemy laws in all the states, even after the founding of the federal government, and after the American Revolution, and as late as the 1860s, at the end of the Civil War, there were court cases which ruled very explicitly that freedom of religion and freedom of speech did not permit blasphemy. The blasphemy laws could still be enforced. If people insulted God or insulted religion, they could be sent to jail and heavily fined. Now we have satanic blasphemy laws which say that if you say there are two genders, or if you say that marriage is only between a man and a woman, you can be jailed for blasphemy. And there are cases less so in the United States, but there are cases all around the world. There are cases in Canada, there are cases in Finland, there are cases in Norway, there are cases in Sweden, where pastors got jailed for quoting the Bible, quoting what the Bible said about homosexuality. So we have kind of the reverse of blasphemy laws. We have satanic blasphemy laws, essentially. That's all by way of just illustration to say you're not going to leave the seat of authority over human salvation empty if you take God out of government, out of authority, out of the legal system. You're going to get the one who wants to pretend to be God to take his place and to turn everything upside down. Okay, I'm going to go back and forth between the religious authorities and the political sphere, because this is all about the intersection between religious authority and secular authority. So let me go to some of our founding fathers. George Washington, the ultimate founding father, right? The first president, and also the general who won the Revolutionary War. There's a direct quote from his inaugural address. "The propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained." Okay, so much for separation of church and state, right? Heaven cannot smile on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. Thomas Jefferson, another of the founding fathers. "I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just and that his justice cannot sleep forever. So plenty of illustrations that when the founding documents of the United States were written, it was understood by the framers of the Constitution that the system of government only works under God with reference to God. Okay, let me see if I have something else, somewhere else to go there before. No, I think I'll switch gears to the religious sphere, and I will read some passages from Cardinal Pius, the Bishop of Poitiers, France, in the middle of the 19th century. I neglected to say at the outset of the show, mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. I neglected to say that this is a live call-in program, and if you wish to call in, the number here is 866-333-6279 or 866-333-MARY, M-A-R-Y. Or if you use Skype, you can Skype in at on_air. Well, you know what? I'm drawing a blank on the Skype number, so I'll just stick to the phone number, 866-333-6279. Now let me read from Cardinal Pius on what the spiritual essence of government is. This is the direct quote now. Jesus Christ has been constituted the King of Kings. Yes, and the true glory, the true nobility of kings, ever since the preaching of the gospel, has consisted in being the lieutenants of Jesus Christ on earth. Has the greatness of kings been diminished by the crosses glittering atop their crowns? Have their thrones been less renowned or less secure on account of their kingship being recognized as an emanation of and participation in the kingship of Jesus Christ? Jesus Christ is King, and the true dignity, the true liberty, the true emancipation of modern nations lies in their right to be governed in a Christian manner. Have such nations fallen short of their glory? Has their fate been less noble, less happy, on account of their ruling scepters being bound to submit to the scepter of Jesus? I'm going to repeat that sentence since I stumbled over it. Has their fate been less noble, less happy, on account of their ruling scepters being bound to submit to the scepter of Jesus? Let it be repeated, brethren. Christianity does not reach its full development, its full maturity, where it does not take on a social character. Christ does not reign if his church is not mistress, if the peoples cease to pay to Jesus Christ, to his doctrine, to his law, a national homage. When the Christianity of a country is reduced to the bare proportions of the domestic life, when Christianity is no longer the soul of public life, of public power, of public institutions, then Jesus Christ deals with his country in the manner he is there dealt with. He continues to give his grace and his blessings to the individuals who serve him, but he abandons the institutions, the powers which do not serve him. And the institutions, the kings, the nations, become like shifting sand in the desert. They fall away like the autumn leaves which are gone with the wind. Let me skip, I'll go back to that, but let me read a very pithy quote of Cardinal Pius when he was addressing the Emperor of France, Napoleon III. This is in the late 19th century. Addressing Napoleon III, he declared, "If the time has not yet come for Christ to reign, oh well, then the time has not yet come for governments to last." If God is not sovereign over a government, it is doomed to failure. And we've seen, I won't name any particular countries, although most of us are in the United States right now, we have seen that when God is taken out of the schools, God is taken out of the government, God is taken out of the courts, God is taken out of the legal systems, the entire edifice crumbles. Anyway, back to Cardinal Pius. The main error, the capital crime of this century, is the pretension of withdrawing public society from the government and the law of God. The principle laid at the basis of the whole modern social structure is atheism of the law and of the institutions. Let it be disguised under the names of abstention, neutrality, and competence, or even equal protection. Let us even go to the length of denying it by some legislative dispositions for details, or by accidental and secondary acts. The principle of the emancipation of the human society from the religious order remains at the bottom of things. This is the essence of what is called the new era. Okay? So what we have done is we have enthroned atheism. It's not true that we don't have a state religion, of course. We do have a state religion. It's atheism. God cannot be included in any equation. Now, let me step back and just speak for myself for a moment. On the one hand, you have entrusting society to human nature and human reason. We know the fallen state of human nature. We do as Catholics, certainly, from original sin. And we know the limitations of human reason compared to the wisdom and knowledge of God. On the one hand, you have the rules that make for a successful society and for souls getting to heaven given to us by the creator of the universe, by the creator of all of mankind, by the judge of who gets to heaven and who doesn't get to heaven, by the person who, or the three persons, whichever one way you want to look at God, by the person who created the universe, created physics, created matter, created chemistry, created biology, created the human person, created the two genders, created absolutely everything that is. He has given a set of rules and principles to follow to make everything work right. Are you going to adopt those rules? Or are you going to say, no, we have to start with a blank sheet of paper. We're not allowed to consider those rules as coming from any particular authority, and we have to rely only on human nature and human reason to make the rules that will govern all of us? How well do you think that's going to work? Really? Okay, back to Cardinal Pius. Cardinal Pius saw naturalism as the chief heresy of the modern age and combated it vigorously. As Leo XIII described it in Humanum Genus, naturalism is a doctrine stating that human nature and human reason ought to, in all things, be mistress and guide. Okay, so that's what our government is based on. Human nature and human reason ought, in all things, to be mistress and guide. Cardinal Pius defines it thus: this independent and repulsive attitude of nature with regard to the supernatural and revealed order properly constitutes the heresy of naturalism. Okay? Again, you have a supernatural and revealed order by God himself, and then you have the substitution of human nature and human reason for that revelation. Continuing, in short, Cardinal Pius called it anti-Christianity. He continued, by neither allowing the incarnation of the natural Son of God nor the divine adoption of man to remain, it suppresses Christianity both at its top and at its bottom. It harms it in its source and in its branches. In other words, it attacks the supernatural at the very top, that is attacking the existence of God, and it attacks the supernatural at the bottom, so to speak, which is the divine element in human nature. Comparing naturalism with ordinary heresy, he states, heresy denies one or several dogmas. Naturalism denies that there are dogmas, or that there may be any. Heresy more or less alters divine revelations. Naturalism denies that God is revealer. Heresy dismisses God from such or such portion of his kingdom. Naturalism eliminates God from the world and from creation. Oh, I have to take a breath now. I can't wait for the calls to come in. I'll take a short musical break about halfway through halfway through the hour. And that's always a good time to call, is during that short musical break, because of that. Then coming out of the break, I will immediately simply turn to the call board and see if any calls have come in. So once again, if you wish to make a note of it, the number here is 866-333-6279, and the break will come in about 10 minutes. Or if you'd like to use Skype, the Skype name or number here is on.air.rm.Skype. Okay, back to Bishop Pius. Throughout his work, Cardinal Pius maintains the primacy of the supernatural. He insists that the supernatural order is obligatory and indispensable. Of course, the supernatural order, this is me commenting, is obligatory and indispensable because all of creation comes from the supernatural order, and all of creation that endures will go back to the supernatural order. We are only in this natural order for not even a blink of an eye, right? 120 years at the absolute most. We came from the supernatural order when we were created, and we will go back to the supernatural order for not hundreds of millions of years, but for an eternity. So really, how can the natural order be more primary than the supernatural order? Especially when it's the natural order, it's what we do in this short period in the natural order that determines our eternity, whether that eternity will be an eternity of bliss, unimaginable bliss, embraced by the love of God and the saints, or whether that eternity is going to be unimaginable, unremitting, absolute devoid of hope, suffering. It's your choice, boys and girls. But we've turned over the government, obviously, to the wrong side of that choice. Okay. Given that God, by his will and love, has constituted our nature within the supernatural order, it is necessarily binding on us. Cardinal Pius declares, by assigning us a supernatural vocation, God has made an act of love, but he has also made an act of authority. He has given, but by giving he wishes that we accept. His benefit for us becomes a duty. Jesus Christ is not optional. I'll just repeat that sentence. His benefit for us becomes a duty. Jesus Christ is our salvation. Jesus Christ is the great benefit that God gave to us. The benefit comes with a duty. Jesus Christ is not optional. Jesus Christ is King, not only of heaven, but further of earth, and it belongs to him to exercise a true and supreme kingship over human societies. This is an indisputable point of Christian doctrine. God has made Christ head and leader of all things, says St. Paul, and of all things without exception. It is not enough just to believe that God exists. It is necessary for us to believe in God, and this means that while recognizing the existence of the sovereign being, we have duties to fulfill towards him. If we believe in God, we must subject our reason to his revelation, our will to his will, and our actions to his law. That's what believing in God really means. Cardinal Pius adds, we have at least to offer God this tribute of public religion, this act of national faith, which would be the recognition of his empire and the proclamation of his supreme rights. Okay? The least that a nation can do is give God the tribute of the public recognition of God's supreme rights. We have unfortunately done exactly the opposite. We have given God a public denial of his supreme rights. How much more of a denial of his supreme rights can you get than the criminalizing the statement that there are two genders, that God created man, male and female, and that marriage is, by the way, between a man and a woman. Anyway, continuing from Cardinal Pius. To those who claim that Christ's kingdom is limited to heaven, and he is not concerned with temporal matters on earth below, Cardinal Pius points out that Christ's words, "My kingdom is not of this world," taken from John, I butchered that. Let me start over. And now this is my words to disentangle what I said. There are people who claim that when Christ said, "My kingdom is not of this world," he was saying that his kingdom is limited to heaven and he's not concerned with temporal matters. However, contrary to that, Cardinal Pius explains what Christ meant by those words. Quote, "His kingdom is assuredly not of this world. That is to say, it does not originate from this world, and it is because he comes from above and not below." Okay? So, in other words, his kingdom is not of this world. It doesn't come from this world. It comes from the supernatural world, and that's what it means, that his kingdom isn't of this world. However, that doesn't mean that the supernatural authority that he has is not sovereign over the temporal world. The overtly secular order of things is part and parcel of the modern age. Turning to the words of Cardinal Pius, but the principle placed at the base of the modern social edifice, this has been the atheism of the law and of institutions, that we disguise it under the names of abstention, neutrality, or equal protection. Emancipation of human society in relation to the religious order remains at the bottom of things. It is the essence of what we call the modern times. Even the pagan sages of ancient Greece and Rome understood that one can more easily build a city in the air than a society apart from the worship of the gods. Condemning the practical atheism of the day, in which society does not formally deny the existence of God, but rather rules itself as though God does not exist, Cardinal Pius states, "God will reign, and if he does not reign by the benefits inseparable from his presence, he will reign by calamities inseparable from his absence." Jesus actually makes that quite clear, right? When he talks about the times to precede the second coming. He says there'll be wars and rumors of wars and disasters, a roaring of the sea and the waves, and the earth trembling with fear and foreboding, and the stars falling from heaven, and so forth. And then the Son of Man shall return in a cloud with great power and glory. So Jesus makes it clear that when man has rejected God in the terminal state of things, just before the second coming, the entire created world of man will show God's sovereignty by the calamities inseparable from his absence, from him having been expelled. I will continue just for about 2 minutes and then take the break and take any calls that come in. Modern secular society only recognizes its rulers and leaders as those who are rebels against the Lord and his anointed, and who refuse to be constrained by the Lord's bonds and yoke. These secularists wish to consign to oblivion any notion of the Christian state, of Christian law, and of the Christian prince. What follows is no longer the sweet yoke of Christ, but absolute bondage. Here, the imaginary theocracy of the Church is replaced with a theocracy as absolute as it is illegitimate, the theocracy of Caesar, head and arbiter of religion, supreme oracle of doctrine and law. In fact, this is a renewed pagan theocracy, soon to be carried out in the reign of high priest people and of the God state. This politics without God has a name. In the Gospels it is called the prince of this world, or the power of the beast, but today it is called the revolution, or if I may add something more contemporary, the Great Reset, or Build Back Better, or whatever. So what Cardinal Pius is pointing out here is you're not going to have a government that is not a theocracy. It's either going to be a theocracy with God at its head, or it's going to be a theocracy. And by the way, Christ's yoke is easy to bear and pleasant. But if is not Christ's yoke, it's going to be the yoke of the enemy of Christ, the enemy of man's salvation, whose yoke is anything but easy to bear and pleasant. We are going to be either enthroning Christ as the lawgiver, so to speak, or we are going to be enthroning Satan as the lawgiver. The prince of this world, the power of the beast. So anyway, with that, on that cheerful note, I will take a short musical break, and I will play. I have two selections here that I have to choose between. I hate having to choose. I have to choose between the hymn to Christ the King, Glory and Praise and Honor, or Come Lord Jesus. So for now, I'll turn to the hymn to Christ the King, I suppose. And it'll run for a few minutes, and the number is 866-333-6279. If you wish to call in during the music, I'll immediately go to the call board after the break and take your calls or comments or objections or complaints or arrest warrants or whatever they may be. So with that, let's go to the hymn to Christ the King. Okay, well, I'm back, and that was Harp a Day, by the way, singing that beautiful a cappella Gregorian chant. Well, it's probably not literally Gregorian chant, I take that back. Praise and honor and glory to Christ the King. And you're listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Showman. And I've been spending today's show talking about the relationship between, you could say, church and state, or the difference between a nation that is ruled by the law of God and a nation that is committed to being ruled by whatever it is, has to be in absolute absence of God. So, okay, now I've promised you 2 papal encyclicals, and I've spent all this time so far speaking about a lowly cardinal, Cardinal Pius. He was a cardinal of Poitiers in France, Bishop of Poitiers in France, in the first half of the, actually not the first half, second half of the 19th century. Now I'm going to go to at least one of the papal encyclicals I promised to talk about, Mirari Vos by Pope Gregory XVI. And this was promulgated in 1832. So we're only 9 years short of this being 200 years ago. And I think you'll see that it is prophetic, to say the least. Okay, so Mirari Vos by Pope Gregory XVI. We come to you grieving and sorrowful, because we know that you are concerned for the faith in these difficult times. Now is truly the time in which the powers of darkness winnow the elect like wheat. We speak of things which you see with your own eyes, which we both bemoan. Depravity exalts, science is impudent, liberty dissolute. The holiness of the sacred is despised. The majesty of divine worship is not only disapproved of by evil men, but defiled and held up to ridicule. Hence sound doctrine is perverted, and errors of all kinds spread boldly. The laws of the sacred, the rites, institutions, and discipline, none are safe from the audacity of those speaking evil. I think we have a caller coming in, so I'll take that call. I'll finish the paragraph because I haven't been connected to the caller yet. Okay, the laws of the sacred, the rites, institutions, and discipline, none are safe from the audacity of those speaking evil. Academies and schools resound with new monstrous opinions, which openly attack the Catholic faith. This horrible and nefarious war is openly and even publicly waged. Thus, by institutions and by the examples of teachers, the minds of the youth are corrupted, and a tremendous blow is dealt to religion, and the perversion of morals is spread. So the restraints of religion are thrown off, by which alone kingdoms stand. We see the destruction of public order, the fall of principalities, and the overturning of all legitimate power approaching. I see the caller is not on the line. I see that she's called in and left a question, which I will address, but let me just talk a moment about what I just read. This is 1832. I'll reread the last 2 sentences. The laws of the sacred, the rites, institutions, and discipline, none are safe from the audacity of those speaking evil. Academies and schools resound with new monstrous opinions, which openly attack the Catholic faith. This horrible and nefarious war is openly and even publicly waged. Thus, by institutions and by the examples of teachers, the minds of the youth are corrupted, and a tremendous blow is dealt to religion, and the perversion of morals is spread. I mean, what is a more powerful illustration of that than the LGBTQ ideology being coerced in all of our public education, even private education systems? My wife is a professor at Ave Maria, which is not in that category. Ave Maria University in Florida is an extremely spiritually healthy place. I strongly recommend it if you want to protect your college-age children from the worst of the woke culture. And they're getting professors. They're getting very senior professors from far more prestigious institutions who flock there because they can no longer tolerate having to use chosen pronouns and chosen names and so forth and so on, and embrace the rainbow, let's say. And so they can't in good conscience continue in that atmosphere. So, and they can't continue actually proselytizing, because if I mean, I have a good friend there who will remain nameless, but he was ordered. He was told he had to use the wrong pronouns, or rather, he had to use the chosen pronouns for people. So, if they were male, he had to use the female pronouns or whatever if they asked for it. And he decided he can't do that, so he stopped using pronouns entirely. And then he was told he can't stop using pronouns entirely. He still has to use the chosen pronouns. So what could he do? He left a tenured position that paid multiple times what they pay at Ave Maria, and fled to Ave Maria to be able to deal with students in good conscience and not feel like he was leading them to hell. And what I'm reading is from the 1830s. Pretty incredible. Okay, so that's a good introduction to the question that got called in. Marina from El Paso, Texas would like to know what should we do as lay people about woke theology in our society. And I would say that if you as a layperson are a Supreme Court judge, I could have some suggestions about what you should do. But if you are an ordinary civilian, then I don't think there's much we can do to change our society. We can stay in a state of grace. We can behave in the way that's most pleasing to God. And we can be as positive an influence on those around us as we can possibly be. But I don't think an individual is in a position to change society. He can only change his very small sandbox that he lives in. So change yourself first, and be a good influence to everyone you have close contact with, and pray a lot, and pray for discernment about when you should stick your neck out and when you should be like a turtle and pull your neck back, because prudence is a virtue, and it doesn't do anyone any good to make a gesture which is only an empty gesture but results in disaster to your life or to lives of those who love you and so forth. So I do not have a silver bullet. I don't think we can do much. And we can also, by the way, for Catholics, we can also try to encourage, in a charitable way, the Catholic institutions around us to hold fast to the teachings of Christ and not to the orders that come down from secular authorities or perhaps from misguided Catholic theological sources. Okay, back to Pope Gregory XVI. However, the call board is open. The number is 866-333-6279. Wow. We see the destruction of public order, the fall of principalities, and the overturning of all legitimate power approaching. This is 190 years ago. I think we've seen it arrive by now. In this you must labor and diligently take care that the faith may be preserved amidst this great conspiracy of impious men who attempt to tear down and destroy it. That's a good answer for you, Marina. That's what we can do as lay people. We can take care that the faith is preserved in the face of this conspiracy of impious men who attempt to tear down and destroy it. Do everything you can to promote the faith. Now we consider, going back to the encyclical Mirari Vos, now we consider another abundant source of evils with which the Church is afflicted at present, indifferentism. This perverse opinion is spread on all sides by the fraud of the wicked, who claim that it is possible to obtain the eternal salvation of the soul by the profession of any kind of religion, as long as morality is maintained. Surely, in so clear a matter, you will drive this deadly error far from the people committed to your care. I am going to make a little contemporary comment on this. As long as morality is maintained, the question is, how do you know what morality is if you're not in the true religion? There are religions that claim, I don't want to say we're all Catholics here, we're not, but there are religions that claim that you should get vengeance on your enemies. They claim that it's moral to kill somebody to save face, to restore your face. There's even a religion out there that has fathers killing their teenage daughters. If the teenage daughters behave immodestly, the father has to restore the face of the family, has to restore the honor of the family by killing the daughter. That's morality, or that's what they think is morality. So I don't even know what it means to say that you can maintain morality if you don't have true religion. Now, I don't want to get controversial, but divorce is an interesting case, right? Because it certainly seems that Christianity, until the 20th century, all flavors of Christianity taught that marriage was a sacrament that lasted until death. So if you're in a version of Christianity that allows for divorce, are you maintaining morality if you get divorced? Or, in other words, how do you know what the morality of divorce is or isn't if your religion teaches you the wrong thing? So, anyway, today's my day for skating on thin ice. But anyway, okay. Surely, in so clear a matter, you will drive this deadly error far from the people committed to your care. The deadly error that it doesn't matter what religion you profess as long as you maintain morality. With the admonition of the apostle that there is one God, one faith, one baptism, may those fear who contrive the notion that the safe harbor of salvation is open to persons of any religion whatsoever. They should consider the testimony of Christ himself, that those who are not with him are against him, and that they disperse unhappily who do not gather with him. Therefore, this is only a quote from St. Athanasius, so you don't have to believe this. This is only a quote from St. Athanasius that's cited in the encyclical. But St. Athanasius said, without a doubt they will perish forever unless they hold the Catholic faith whole and inviolate. Okay, I will continue. I'm going to leave that aside because I know that this teaching has been, I think the term is nuanced more recently. Okay, I'll go to the next paragraph. Oops, we have a caller. Fine, wonderful. If you could give us your name and where you're calling from, please. Hello? Okay, Molly, are you there? I'm pretty good. I'm having a ball. How are you? I thank you for the question, but I'm not going to answer, I think, the way that you want. I am a little bit of a pragmatist, and he wasn't in a position to catechize the American population on what Catholicism means, what dogma means, and so forth. He wouldn't get a hearing. People are not going to listen to 2 pages of him explaining why that's not a danger. So the fact that he took a shortcut and said something which was rather crude, I'm fine with. Is that okay? He ended up being president. There's no way he would have ended up being president if he said, of course my Catholic faith is going to inform all of my decisions, and anything that's contrary to the Catholic dogma, I'm going to go with Catholic dogma and not with what the country wants. That just wouldn't have flown. Okay. Since I've been so politically incorrect so far this show, I'm going to put the icing on the cake. I make an argument that monarchy is actually a healthier form of government than democracy, okay? Because if you have a monarchy, take King Henry II. This is his feast day today. On the traditional calendar, it was his feast day 2 days ago or 3 days ago on the Novus Ordo calendar. He was a saint. Blessed Karl, the last Holy Roman Emperor in the when did he die? He died 1930 or something. He's a blessed. I mean, he is essentially a saint. If you have a monarchy, God is in a position to see that the person who inherits the crown is saint material. If you have a democracy, excuse me, but every candidate is going to have to lie before he gets elected. So you have a system that precludes sanctity. Do you see what I mean? I'm not, look, I have enough trouble figuring out what I should be doing. I can't be in the business of figuring out what other people should be doing or where God is leading other people. But I see the point of this show, and we're coming to the last couple of minutes. I thank you very much for this call. This is a wonderful way to wrap up. The point of the show is not that I have an answer to these paradoxes. The point of the show is to illumine the paradoxes, and kind of get people out of a cookie cutter mold of thinking they're easy answers, or if only this or if only that. It's a really messy situation, a complicated situation. I don't know what the right answer is. I just think it's a really interesting problem domain, and one that is very fruitful to think about and to use when you evaluate the situation. And the main reason I want to do this show is that we are actually living in a legal, governmental, even economic system, not so much the economic system, that's essentially run by Antichrist. And people look around and they get despairing and everything's going wrong. But it's the natural course of events. If you take God off his throne, you're not going to leave that throne empty. And so I want to be kind of encouraging and say there's no if only this or if only that. Either you'll be one nation under God, as it says in our Constitution or Declaration of Independence, or you're going to be one nation under the father of lies and the father of chaos. But even this is all entirely encompassed by divine providence. What was that quote that I forgot? But that I read earlier today. That it was actually a quote from a founding father. It was that. Well, I know I don't have I can't find the quote off the top of my head, but that if things are not going to turn out well if you're not gaining God's favor, and you don't gain God's favor by banning him and reversing the blasphemy to say that you go to jail if you quote the Bible and so forth. So, we're getting what we asked for, and we're here, and we're still on our way to heaven, and we can still do everything possible to get all our loved ones to heaven, and we can stay in a state of grace, and we can evangelize, and we can be a positive influence on our loved ones, and we can love everybody to be able to be a positive influence on them. And with that, I think it's time for me to go. You've been listening to Jesus, the Promised Messiah of Judaism, on Radio Maria with me, your host, Roy Schoeman. I hope you join us again next week, same time, same place. And I'm going to go out with a different beautiful chant of the same Harpa Dei group. And this is Come Lord Jesus, because we know that before the second coming, things are going to look very, very bleak. We know that things look pretty bleak now. We don't know if this is the last round or if there is a new springtime and we're many cycles away from the last round. But we are commanded in the Bible to pray that the Lord Jesus come again. So I want to close with a prayer that the Lord Jesus come again. And if you want my 2 cents, I hope it's sooner rather than later. So thank you very much for listening, and please join us again next week, same time, same place. Bye for now. Oops.